89.3 FM. This is member-supported WPFW, Washington.
Good afternoon and welcome to Inside Out. This is your host for today, Dr. Nicole Cutts. Inside Out comes to you live every Tuesday from 2 to 3 here on 89.3 FM. And you can also listen online at www.wpfwfm.org. On Inside Out, we like to look at everything from pop culture to politics through the LGBT lens. As I mentioned, today I am your host, Dr. Nicole Cutts, the resident psychologist and success coach. I mentioned that I'm your host for today because we have a new format where we are the Inside Out Collective, and I am one of 4 hosts. We also have Angela Peebles, David Noss, and Lady Dane Aditi, who will be coming to you on the other Tuesdays of the month. So without further ado, I'd like to play a little clip for you that's going to introduce the topic of today's show, and then we're going to get right into it.
This is a day of national consecration. And I am certain that on this day, my fellow Americans expect that on my induction into the presidency, I will address them with a candor and a decision which the present situation of our people impels. So first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror.
Yes, thank you. And that was the famous inaugural speech from FDR in which he coined the phrase, "We have nothing to fear except fear itself." That is what we're going to be talking about today, folks. We're going to be talking about fear, how to conquer your fear, because fear is what often stands in the way of our success and living our lives to the fullest and what we envision. Now, fear can also be an acronym, FEAR. It can stand for F, everything, and run. And, you know, F could be forget it, as one of my guests mentioned earlier, which I'll tell you about in a minute, or face everything and rise. So I'm going to be talking to 3 incredible women today who have done the latter, who have faced their fears and risen. Now, as a psychologist and a success coach, I deal with fear every day, not only my own, but also with my clients. You know, there are people who, we all deal with fear in our everyday lives, and fear is often the thing that blocks people from getting what they want in life, doing what they need to do. It creates paralysis, avoidance, procrastination, and it can also rob people of their joy. So I've seen many people who have been stymied by fear, who don't move on, but I've also had the pleasure of seeing people who have conquered their fear and they are living lives they are meant to live, and they are happy and they are joyful and they are free of that fear. Now, I want to mention there is a healthy part of fear. Fear can be adaptive. It is a normal reaction that we all have, and all organisms have this, where we shrink from things that are possibly dangerous. We have the fight or flight syndrome, which is sometimes very necessary. It's good to be afraid sometimes. And so it is important to listen to your fear and see what it is trying to tell you, because sometimes it means you need to get away from something. But the type of fear that we're going to focus on today is not the adaptive type of fear. We're going to talk about when fear takes over and blocks you or holds you back from doing the things that you really want to do, that you need to do. As Jack Canfield said, everything you want is on the other side of fear. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about getting to the other side of fear. I want to read you one more quote that I found that I really loved from Ralph Waldo Emerson. He said, "Do not be too timid and squeamish about your actions. All life is an experiment. The more experiments you make, the better. What if they are a little coarse and you may get your coat soiled or torn? What if you fail and get fairly rolled in the dirt once or twice? Up again, you shall never be so afraid of a tumble." Okay, so we are going to be talking to three incredible women today who have tumbled. They've taken some tumbles and they've gotten back up. And that's what fear is. Bravery is not the absence of fear. Bravery is acting in the face of fear. So rather than me sit here and tell you about my prescription for conquering fear, it makes a lot more sense for us to talk to women who themselves have conquered their own fears. So let me tell you a little bit about who we're going to be talking to today. Our first guest, who we'll be calling in shortly, is Rachelle LeBlanc. And in 2009, Rachelle contributed to the anthology How the Fierce Handle Fear, where she and others, such as Donald Trump, share their stories about their relationship with fear. Okay? Little did she know that her sharing would begin a healing process for so many. After taking stock in her own process of healing, as well as the process of others, one glaring common denominator was lack of balance. So Rachelle is going to be talking to us today about how she realized that a lack of balance contributed to fear. Now, whether it was relationships or disease imbalance, these things seem to be at the root of these fears. So her second book that's going to be coming out is Your Daily Slice Journal. She's going to tell you about that herself. Rachelle has also been a networking and publicity maverick as a professional in the world of entertainment for the last 20 years. And she is a certified wellness coach and nutrition therapy practitioner candidate. Her goal is to meet people where they are and to partner with them for breakthroughs so they can manifest the lives they want. Now, as a master meditation teacher, her goal is to provide a platform for people to be still, look inside of themselves, and discover every answer and fill every gap. And as a Reiki master, her goal is to provide the ultimate experience in relaxation, clearing, and healing of the mind, body, and spirit. Now, when she's not coaching or providing services, Rachelle still works with a small roster of PR and marketing clients and is currently in school for nutritional therapy at the Nutritional Therapy Institute. And I really want to welcome today to the program Miss Rachelle LeBlanc. Rachelle, are you on the line?
I am. How are you today?
I am great. Welcome to Inside Out.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's our pleasure
to be here with you ladies today.
Yes.
Yeah, how's it going?
It's going great. So we want to talk to you today about how you have faced fear and how you've handled it. And, as I mentioned, you are a co-author on an anthology entitled How the Fierce Handle Fear. So, and you talked about your own story. So maybe you can tell us just, in 5 minutes or so, if you can, your story of facing fear. What kind of fear were you dealing with?
Oh my goodness! My fear was the kind that was bigger than me. I had allowed it to snowball into something much bigger than myself. It was panic. It was anxiety. I was getting panic attacks and anxiety attacks. I had no idea what in the world was going on. And then a little bit of depression was mixed all up in there too. Mm-hmm. And it hit me. It's just little things started to change, and I started to get these attacks while driving on the freeway.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, what's going on here? And just the urge to flee, you know, to get off the freeway, like you feel like you're passing out. Anyone who's experienced these, they know you get sweaty palms and your heart starts racing, and it's very foreign and scary. So for a little while, I didn't do anything about it. I just thought, well, I don't know what that was, but let's hope it doesn't happen again. But what we start doing is we start fearing the fear, right? So I'm not afraid to get on the freeway. I'm afraid of that fear coming back while I'm on the freeway. So that prevented me from driving on the freeway for over 2 years. Wow. Took the back roads everywhere I went. So those little things, we have to be really careful now. Had I known what I know now, I would have made myself get on that freeway. I would have jumped back on that horse, because we know that we have to conquer those fears, as you mentioned earlier. Right. But the process for overcoming this was really life-altering for me. And mind you, this was back in '95 when I was experiencing this. Fast forward to 2009 when I wrote the book, that I didn't realize until then that experience 10 years ago was for this moment, for me to share the story and to help other people start their process of healing.
Yeah, because there are a lot of people out there who deal with debilitating fear.
Absolutely, and I didn't know that until I started doing the research. You know, I just felt like something was different about myself. I was not being who I am. I know me, you know, your relationships change. People start to look at you differently because maybe you don't want to hang out, or maybe you start, you know. What was interesting for me was the fear change. It went from freeway to social anxiety. From social anxiety to, you know, I had to see myself at work or I couldn't go. And then that went from me not wanting to leave the house. And that's when I was like, whoa, something has to be done. And that's when my research started,
So it sounds like the fear started spreading into all different areas of your life and just becoming more and more debilitating.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's exactly what happened.
Did you get any understanding later on maybe about what triggered the fear initially?
I did. I mean, I've always had a special relationship with fear. For those who have read my, you know, chapter in the book, it starts out with me running across this parking lot, and I hear this ching, ching, ching sound, and it's making me run faster and faster. I think there's a dog behind me, but it's really the zipper on the back of my dress. Like, I've always had this thing like, what is that, you know? Yeah. But around that time in my life, my parents were, you know, going through a divorce. There were a lot of things happening in my life that I really didn't have a lot of control over. And it created a sense of the bottom falling out. You know, when you, right? So, and I was having a problem surrendering to that.
Right. So you were experiencing a sort of intense lack of control in your life as a young person. It sounds like,
Absolutely, and not just of little things, but you know, of my family, like you know, my parents, you know, the foundation. Of you know, so it was big, and I didn't realize that. So I suppressed it, and it just manifested itself in another way. Right. That was one of the things. The other thing I believe was I was also spiritual. It was time for change in my life. And again, not, you know, kind of being afraid of change and not wanting to succumb to that feeling of change. We suppress it, but again, Spirit will always tell us when it's time to move or change, right? So I think it was a couple of those things, both of those things happening at the same time.
Okay, so then bring us up to, you started to do research once this fear became so huge that it was keeping you pinned down in your house, right? So it sounds like it was keeping you from living, actually. And so what did you find out? What did you take out of this that went into your chapter in your book?
Well, there were a couple of things a couple of very important rituals that I still do to this day that I started at that time to overcome that. Journaling was one. Okay. Very instrumental in not only addressing and having a safe place for release, but also for me to take stock in my growth and development. You know, when you read back on those things, very helpful. The other was meditation. And I didn't sit down and say, I'm going to meditate. I gravitated toward what felt good, and it was being still. Right. Being still felt good. Listening felt good. Praying, reading, that felt good. So that's what I did, more of those things. I realized, however, I went to sleep, that's how I woke up.
Now, did your question about the meditation, Was that your instinct that told you, because of that desire to be still and peaceful, that said, you know what, I need to find something to do this? Or did somebody outside of you say, hey, you should consider meditation?
It was instinct.
Okay.
It was me understanding that whatever I did the night before was how I woke up. So my intention was to be as peaceful and still as possible when I was asleep, so that I woke up, because this is very emotionally draining. So I wanted to wake up to make sure I was prepared to face the day, for those challenges, to prepare to see myself where I needed to be in order to get through the day.
Gotcha.
So meditation became a staple for me. It became a survival mechanism, actually. And creative visualization, seeing myself doing the things that I know I needed to do. That was another big piece for me.
Now, in terms of the technique you use to meditate, for those folks who are listening, how did you learn to meditate?
Well, initially it was, again, just stillness. It was, I literally would pray and wait for the answer.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? I would pray, ask, and then just be still.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But if I remained open, I knew that my answers may not come then. It could come at midday. It could come from a total stranger, just being open.
Yeah.
But later when the creative visualization piece came in, when I started to realize I had to see and envision certain things, then I started doing more of a guided meditation. Where my mind was, walking me through a process.
Okay.
So I would walk myself, visualize myself getting in the car, driving to work, being at work all day, at my desk, leaving work, driving home. Like, I had to see all of that.
Right. So now this is pretty incredible. What I'm hearing is that you took yourself through this process. Did you work with anybody at the time, or was this just your oh wow? So it was your instinct and then researching that guided you on this path?
Well, in the part of my research, I also researched the medication, which, after doing the research on that and the side effects and those things, I decided that didn't work for me.
Okay.
But I always encourage people to, if you feel like it's chemical or that you need that, by all means, do what's best for you. For me, it didn't feel right for me.
Right. So you didn't go the medication route. You didn't go with the anti-anxiety.
I didn't go the medication right. Nope, I didn't do that. I didn't seek professional help. I sought spiritual guidance, but I didn't seek professional help. And it took about a year. And after a year, believe it or not, I moved from San Diego, from not being able to leave my house, to New York, of all places.
Wow.
So
that was implosion therapy.
Yeah, right.
You went from Southern California to New York. Okay.
To New York. Because I will tell you this, in that process of me journaling for that year and a half, when I went back to read that journal, I had written my life plan for the next year.
Wow.
It was all right there.
And New York was in the plan. So what took you to New York? Was it a job? Was it just an instinct to move to New York? What got you there?
It was my pursuit of what's next in my life, which was a career in entertainment at the time.
Okay.
And so, I was like, okay. So I put it out there, and maybe 2 weeks later, I got a call from a relative that says, "Look, I'm working on a project. You think you can come out and help for a couple of months?" Of course. And I stayed. I was there for 13 years. I never went back.
Wow.
So, it's such a, when I share this story, even in the book or when I'm speaking about it now to workshops and what have you, it's such a testament of how much power we have to overcome our fear.
Yeah.
To acknowledge it. And as you said before, fear is very important. It can tell us what's not right, and it can tell us what is right.
Right.
But when it starts to stop you from living your life and walking in your purpose, that's when it becomes a problem. And that's what it did for me.
Right.
It was stopping me. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's an important point to highlight, is that, as we mentioned and you just reinforced, that fear is adaptive and there's some good sides to it, but when it is stopping you from living your life, when you are debilitated, when you are, and and it doesn't always have to be at those crippling levels. I mean, sometimes it shows up as procrastination. It shows up, in, not going for the job that you really want, not applying for that promotion, not getting out of that relationship that you might be in that's no good for you because you're afraid of change.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all of those things are crippling, and they prevent us from being our best possible self.
Yeah. So now tell us, how did you come to co-author how the fierce handle fear with people like Donald Trump and others.
I was actually having lunch with my good sister, Sonia Scott, who edited the book, and she, we were talking. We just have one of the conversations that we always have, and she said, I would like for you to contribute to this anthology. And I said, well, what is it about? What is it about?
Right.
She said, fear. Right?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God. So immediately my tentacles go up and like, fear. So most people didn't know that story.
Mm-hmm.
Because when they meet me, they're like, whoa, she fills up the room. Like most people never knew that I've had any of those types of things. So I had fear about being a contribution.
Right.
Because of judgment. But, I sat with it for a little while. I thought, I'm going to write my story.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first time I'd ever written it on, put it on paper.
Yeah.
And when I read it back, I was like, whoa, okay.
Yeah,
all right, I'll go ahead and submit it, right? And I was honored and humbled by the reception and the people that, for the very first time, were speaking to me about their fear and how my story, by me sharing it, enabled them to start a healing process.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's when I was like, it was just meant, this, whatever the lesson was for them was just coming through me, through my story.
Right.
And that's why it's so important for us to talk to people about what we're dealing with. And that was a really big part of it. I didn't tell anyone about this for a year because people think you're crazy.
Mm-hmm.
If they've never had a panic attack, they're like, what is she talking about? But when I shared it with my close family and friends, that was really a conduit to help me they really ushered me through the rest of my healing process. So it's important to share with the people around you, that care about you, just to know what you're dealing with. And so me contributing to this was just, Sophronia, she welcomed me to share my story, and I did. And it has made, a huge difference in not only my life, but in the life of people that I've shared it with.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and that's so important. And that's why I wanted to have you and my other surprise guests on the show today.
You like surprises?
Well, I really feel that we learn, I know I do, and I know other people do as well, but we learn from each other's stories more so than a prescription. What worked for one person might not work for the other, but I find that when we listen to people's stories, we see them go through it. We understand, we connect on an emotional level. And it is important, and I really thank you for sharing your story, not just in the book, but in all the forms that you do and with us today, because there are no doubt people out there like you who are saying, I don't want anybody to know that I'm going through this. They're going to think it's a weakness. They're going to think something's wrong with me. They're going to think I'm crazy when it is a real thing, that happens to people. And people who have not experienced debilitating fear or panic attacks do sometimes judge, and it's important for them to know that this is real and that it can be overcome. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us.
No, I mean, of course, anytime. I mean, I think there's so much to be discussed in this space because it looks so different for so many people. And people really, there's no fear centers. You can't walk into, a spot and say, I'm here for my fear. There's no place for people to go and say, this is what's happening with me because it looks so many different ways. So as much as I can, I talk about it and let people know that I'm available, even if it's just for a conversation about it. Because sometimes just that conversation is a relief. Just feeling like you have someone to talk to about it is a relief.
And for folks who are listening, mention where they can, the title of your book again and where they can find it.
It's called How the Fierce Handle Fear. It's on Amazon. My personalized cover, though, you'd have to order directly from me, but the book that's on Amazon, all proceeds go to a nonprofit. And it's How the Fierce Handle Fear, and the subtitle is Secrets to Succeeding in Challenging Times.
Great.
And then my second book that you mentioned was released at the beginning of 2014. And it's basically a journal. I wanted to share that part of my healing process with people because it's such a viable tool, and it's called Your Daily Slice Journal.
Now that's an interesting, Your Daily Slice. What does that mean, Your Daily Slice?
I'm glad you asked. So, when I was in the dark space, right, and it is a dark place, this fear, I would think to myself all the time, if I ever get through this, because sometimes you feel like you're not going to. If I ever get through this, I'm going to celebrate something about my life every single day. And so when I started my coaching company, I called it Cake Every Day. Because I like to celebrate. I like cake. So I call it Take Every Day. And so, so the Daily Slice is just one of my, I just affirm every day. So
Yeah.
I do it on Facebook, on the Facebook page at Take Every Day, and my Twitter. And also, I do tweets and stuff like that. But the Daily Slice is just a small piece of that cake that I share on a regular basis with people.
So the idea
the
with
journal,
Mhm.
So the journal, on each day there's an affirmation or a daily slice, we like to call it, on each day to help people get jump-started and gratitude and all the other things that keep us grounded.
Right. Well, you know, it's
on a daily
important that I like that you mentioned gratitude also and celebrating every day. It's important
Yes.
when you are recovering from fear or from anything else, even just the battle of living life, that you celebrate every day, and that our brains need to be exercised in a way, in a positive direction.
Yes.
You know, fear.
It's a muscle.
Yeah. You know, like they say that the neurons that fire together wire together, and once you've experienced fear, depression, anxiety, it's easier for your brain to experience those things. So it's very important to exercise your brain in a different direction. So to focus on what you've accomplished, to be grateful, even to make a gratitude list is very important. And so I'm glad
It's
that
so
you're doing that work. So I want you to hang on for a moment.
Okay.
I know that. Do you have time to stay with us?
I do.
Okay. So the last question I want to just ask you before I introduce our next guest is if you have any advice or tips for folks who are facing fear in their lives today.
Oh my goodness. Well, again, I mean, I know the things that I did worked for me, and I've used them over the years to work for clients as well. And I think that journaling is very important.
Okay.
Because it allows you to surrender in a sense, and release, you know, some of those things that we're holding on to. The biggest piece for me, that gratitude piece, that gratitude to me was a magnitude to happiness, right? Because it was a magnet. It pulled me out of because you're all in your head. So there's a couple of things. Journaling is one because it allows you to come out of your head onto paper, right? Whatever you're feeling, it's a safe place to be whatever it is you need to be in that time and space to start your healing process. The other thing I recommend to people, which was very helpful to me, was to be in contribution. Because a lot of times when you're in that space of depression, fear, anxiety, it's really, people can look you right in the face and not know what you're dealing with. That's how internal it is.
Yeah.
Who would know, right? Unless you're having physical symptoms. So a lot of times, when you're in contribution, feed some people, go to a soup kitchen, you know, find out a way you can be of service in the community. That's such a great distraction. And it's a great way for you to see how really blessed and fortunate that you are.
Yeah.
And it brings us back to the gratitude piece, right? And then the other thing is to be still. Be still. Because there's a lot of thinking going on when you're in that space. And a lot of times you're thinking yourself out of stuff that's not realistic, or you're creating scenarios that never come to pass.
Right.
Be still. Yeah, stillness is so important.
Right.
Just take some deep breaths, concentrate on your breathing, and worst case scenario, and I did this a couple of times, I would take a rubber band and put it around my wrist, and whenever I felt myself getting wound up, I would snap myself up there. Snap you right out of it.
A little thought
right out of
stoppage.
it, because it hurts. It was painful.
Yeah.
But yeah, all of those things were really helpful for me because it just took me out of myself and out of that space I was in and helped me to see the bigger role I played in the world, and was very instrumental in me moving forward.
Great. Thank you so much. Rachel, if you said you're going to stay with us. We're going to take a short break. Okay. So you have been listening to Inside Out. I'm your host, Dr. Nicole Cutts, and we are on 89.3 WPFW, and we will be right back.
Malcolm X. No sellout. Malcolm X. No sellout. Malcolm the music. Muhammad the message. The soundtrack by Askia. A musical journey examining a letter written in March 1950 by none other than Malcolm X, pondering music, the universal language, musicians, and their place in the Nation of Islam. Listen Tuesday, February 24th, from 7 until 9 p.m. as we go beyond to a musical place you never imagined. There'll be no Charles Dudley, no Flim Flam. Malcolm, the music. Muhammad, the message. The soundtrack by Askia. Tuesday, 7 until 9 p.m. on Jazz and Justice Radio, WPFW, Washington. Malcolm X.
Welcome back to Inside Out. I'm your host and producer, Dr. Nicole Cutts, and we are talking today about conquering fear. It's a topic for everybody. It's something that we deal with in our daily lives, and want to thank Rachel LeBlanc, the author of How the Fierce Handle Fear, who's still with us on the line. And I would like to introduce our next guest, who is no stranger to fear. Her name is Elizabeth Croydon. Now, Elizabeth is an award-winning producer, director, and teacher who has produced 3 feature comedies and several shorts. She's appeared on The Tonight Show, Last Comic Standing, National Lampoon TV, and her upcoming movie, Underbelly Blues, is being released on iTunes. Now, she has trained in Aikido, the martial art, at the Shobukan Dojo for 20 years, and she's going to be appearing at the Broadway Comedy Club in New York, and she'll give you those details on a regular basis. I think that's a new gig she just booked, so congratulations. Elizabeth Croydon, thank you, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hello, DC. Hello.
And, you know, I want to tell our listeners a little bit about how you came to be on the show, because I posted out there in the social media world that I was tackling this topic, and Elizabeth popped up and said, fear, I'm a stand-up comedian, and I've done a few other things I know about fear.
I deal with it every day.
She deals with it every day.
Every day.
And I just said, stand-up comedian, okay, that's a woman who knows fear, because that is one of the scariest things, is to get up there. But there's more to why you face fear on a daily basis. So what's your fear story? What do you want to share with us today?
Oh, well, I think the greatest thing that I ever really did for myself regarding fear was to do whatever I was afraid of anyway. Mm-hmm. I was afraid of looking like an idiot in front of people, and I did it anyway. and now I get money to do it.
See, I wish I could get money for looking like an idiot in front of people, because I can do that.
You know, people are afraid of dying, so I practiced dying. You know, I took up a martial art.
Wait, hold on. I'm sorry. Hold on.
You know, you
practice dying. Tell
Sure,
us about that.
Sure. Well, I study in a martial art called Aikido, and not only do we train, I mean, in the technique of attacking, or it's not an attack actually, or it's the technique of stopping an attack on you. Versus the receiving of a blow, because as you know, in pugilism, especially Ukrainian parliamentary fights, someone's going to be hit.
Yeah.
So you need to know how to handle it, and by practicing going down on the ground and practicing, you know, clearly there were people in my dojo that were much better than me, and you know, I had to deal with them showing me where I could be hit lethally, and then practicing letting go of the panic of, oh my goodness, you know, I this is an opening where I am vulnerable.
Yeah,
I best practice. You know.
Well, you know, when we spoke before on the phone, one of the things that you mentioned, and I want you to explain a little bit to our listeners, and I agree with you. I think that the fear of dying is at the root of all of our fears. I mean, that fight or flight syndrome that's ingrained in us is there to, and I know Rachel is agreeing, is there to help keep us alive. So that's kind of what's, not kind of, that's what's really at the end of all of our fears. So tell us, Elizabeth, since you've been in there with that fear of dying, what does that mean to face that? Because I haven't even come close to that.
Well, I've been attacked a number of times. I've been stalked and attacked a number of times because I'm a public figure, and when you put yourself up there, people will tend to project their animosity or their appreciation, or you know, it just may be like your pure emanation that is forcing them to interact with you, sometimes in very inappropriate ways. And I have had to face that over and over again because I feel that the comedy that I do on stage is important for people to hear. So, the conflict becomes how do I overcome the fear of facing another assault?
So you literally were attacked in the course of doing your work?
Yes. In the course of doing my work, I've literally been attacked about 17 times violently.
Wow.
From
and you keep doing it.
Imbalanced men. I know.
And you keep showing up.
Well, I believe in the Barbie Dalai Lama. I believe in the Muhammad Ali Lama. If you have a voice that needs to be heard, you need to get over any fear that is holding you back from floating like a butterfly and stinging like a bee.
So now you've been attacked several times. Was there ever a time after having a physical altercation or being attacked that you really were afraid to get back up on stage?
Yeah.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
This one time, I totally forgot any of my jokes because I was standing in front of the audience, right? And I thought I had this neon sign that was going, victim, victim, victim. And that really deeply that put me back in a place of shame, which is not a place where you can claim any sort of right to the stage. So
you kind of froze up there.
Yeah. Like Frosty, man.
So Frosty, how did you come back from that? I mean, if you're standing on stage, first of all, stage fright, even when you haven't had attacks, can be debilitating. But you're up there, you're frozen, you feel like they're seeing you as a victim. How did you keep going?
I just did it anyway. Even if all that came out of my mouth was, I said that, and then I sat down.
Yeah.
And the amazing thing is, when you're at that point in your career and you're working out every night with your buddies and your pals, so many other people have said too on stage out of fear that everyone just comes together and forms a community around it. It's not something that anyone has experienced or hasn't experienced before, rather, and you just overcome it. You also write material. You write a lot of material.
Yeah. So you write your material and then you gotta deliver it. But let me ask you something, because you just mentioned, you didn't mention words. You said, but what that makes me think about is when you said you got to get over looking foolish. You got to get over. Tell me and tell us about the role of ego and fear. Like, what the relationship that you think there is between those things?
Oh, that's such an interesting question, a very interesting question. Let's go straight to the psychological sofa right now. Hello, Mrs. Freud? Yes. How did you help your husband overcome fear of writing all of his theories down? Well, I just told him he had to do it anyway. We were hungry, we needed food on the table, and this was an area where he was able to share himself with the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Freud. So what I'm hearing again is do it anyway.
Do it anyway.
So like the ego might be there, it might be real.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing you learn how to do as a martial artist is to sum up the liability, the situation, what could happen. If you are someone who needs to come out of the closet to your parents, you're going to have to do it anyway, even if you are afraid of the consequences. If you are a comic on stage and you need to tell a joke, you're going to have to do it anyway, whether or not you're afraid that the audience will laugh or not laugh.
Yeah.
And it really... once you realize, for most people, that you're not in a physical danger, well then, what is there to fear except maybe a State Department job, security clearance, in which case I might be a little concerned. It might be,
that might not happen.
Write those jokes really carefully.
Now, tell us, how does fear help you?
Oh, well, it's an awakening. You embracing fear. Why am I afraid? Well, I could be really terrible in front of an audience, and I won't. I'll lose that sponsor.
Yeah. So, maybe fear of security.
And you should, be aware of what could happen, the consequences.
Right.
Sometimes you become afraid in a physical situation, and you ought to be aware, and you ought to be very concerned, because this person is going to aggress on you.
Yeah.
And that is good. But once you understand what the consequences are and look at the solutions to the fear, then you just need to do the action.
Okay. I don't want to forget Rachel out there. Rachel, I'm imagining. I'm just imagining you might have some questions for Elizabeth as well.
Well, what she said was very important, and we didn't really talk much about it, but moving past the fear is so important. It's key. And I'm an example of what happens when you don't move past it. You get stuck and it becomes bigger than you. So any little thing you do that can, take a chip out of it that day or that week or that month or whatever it is, just go for it.
Yeah.
It's very, very important.
In my comedy routine, Rachel, I talk very, very much like you do about concentrating on breathing. I call it excremeditation. And for all of us, we have input. And everything, that we receive comes into us through some center. And then we have export, output. And the stuff that gets caught in between is bull. And I have my audience, I have my friends, and I myself have done it, breathe in and think about everything that's ever gone into you. And then you breathe out and think about everything that's ever gone out of you.
Wow.
And then you breathe in again and you think about the stuff caught in between. And then you scream bull as loud and long as you can.
Wow.
And if you're in an urban area and you're not able to do that, then I recommend rock star therapy. Which, you go into your mirror and you look in your mirror, and I'm not kidding you. I know I'm a comedian, all right? But DC stands for danger control. You look in your mirror and you see yourself back and you say out loud to yourself, I am a rock star. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you don't feel that you're a rock star. You can just continue engaging yourself and looking at yourself in the eyes and be like, I am a rock star. And at some point you will feel it in the bottom of your very DNA, like Leonard Cohen singing a love song. And you will realize that everyone is a rock star and is part of the band, whether you need to be alone in order to feel safe in your space, or you are in front of the stage. Everyone is a rock star and you're part of the band.
Wow.
And so everyone has your back.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's important,
It's very important.
And because when you deal with that, you feel very disconnected.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's important to know that you're connected.
I love what you said, Elizabeth. Not just that I'm a rock star, but that we're a part of the band.
Yes, I do too. It's part of my Jackson 5 commandments, really. It's how I live my life. I don't believe in politics. I believe in rock and roll-itics. But the Jackson 5 commandments, the very first one is thou shalt Tito.
What does that mean?
Well, for a scared person, it means Tito through the tulips.
Right?
But, Michael was amazing. Michael could sing 3 octaves. Michael could, moonwalk and make it look easy. And he could improvise a concert and dance moves for 3 hours at a time. But Tito was part of the band.
Yeah.
And Tito lived longer. Quite
Wow.
frankly, so that may philosophically move to an unfunny zone where we're looking at, what is assimilating, what the risks are You know, the Michael took the better to burn out than fade away approach, whereas Tito, you know, is still playing jazz at selective clubs.
Wow.
And Tito was part of the band. He was still part of it.
Yeah.
But longevity is the name of the game, like for these suicidal kids that are out there going, you know, I'm afraid to live because of I'm failing in my parents' eyes. I am gay. I want a different career than my parents want me to have. You know, it's important to understand that Tito lived longer, man.
Yeah.
And he was still a rock star.
Yeah.
So I don't care if you're taking the ticket to the Grateful Dead concert or you're front and center. It's very, very important to realize that we, in the name of John, Paul, George, and Ringo, we all shine on like the moon and the sun and the stars.
And because you can't see, Elizabeth did basically like the sign of the cross. Do that. Say that again. Do that again so we can visualize.
In the name of John, George, Paul, and Ringo.
I love it. I love it. You know, I mean, what you're also highlighting that every day there's something that we can be afraid of.
Yeah,
just
man.
living, just getting up.
I was afraid. I was afraid. I wrestled with fear coming to the studio today. My car ran out of gas up a hill.
Wow.
And I was afraid I was going to miss the show. But if I miss the show, I'm just going to miss the show.
Yeah.
I'm not going to stop breathing. So there's really no point in being afraid. That would hold me from action. And you know what happened was my writer, my joke writer, Evil Do-Gooder, picked me up in his car, drove me my favorite way down Rock Creek Park.
Awesome.
And shared some of the best sativa that I've ever smoked in my entire life. And I'm not afraid to tell you that I smoke sativa because, you know, that would stop you from laughing right now, Rachel. You know? I'm not afraid. You know, it's an impediment. Everything worked out great.
Yeah.
Everything could have not worked out great. And that I would have been sad.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
it didn't.
You wouldn't have died.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, laugh tiny, carry big joke.
Right.
You know?
Well, you know, it's true. I mean, we can't control things. And that's oftentimes, you know, we have that illusion of control and we want to hold on to security, but it's like the serenity prayer. It's like, you know, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Yes, and it's like Blue Oyster Cult, don't fear the Reaper.
That, you know, I love this rock and rollitics and this
Thank you.
the mere religious.
It took failing many times to come up with it.
Thank you. We need to, I'm going to bring in our next guest, who is, I told you all in the lineup that you were going to prepare to be amazed. I have yet another amazing woman on the line. Her name is Dr. Mary Britton, and she's called Dr. Mary by her patients. Now, Dr. Mary, and Rachel knows her, Dr. Mary was born in Birmingham and raised in nearby Leeds, Alabama, so expect to hear a beautiful, genteel Southern accent. She pursued undergraduate studies at the University of Alabama in Birmingham and the University of Montevideo, I hope I'm saying that right, in Alabama. And in 1978, Dr. Mary moved to Atlanta, where she currently resides, to pursue a career in the healing arts. And she received her doctorate in chiropractic from Life Chiropractic College in Marietta, Georgia, in 1985. Now, on February 26th, so wow, we're coming up on the anniversary, Dr. Mary. On February 26, 2006, Dr. Mary was diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor. And in her own words, she felt as if she was pushed off a tall building and began rapidly falling to the ground. It was fly or die time. And it was then that she realized the true power of her inner survivor's skills. And I want to welcome Dr. Mary Britton to the show today. Dr. Mary, welcome.
Well, welcome to you. Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be on.
It's our pleasure.
With all of you wonderful women.
Thank you.
It's quite an honor. Yeah.
So we have a short amount of time left, Dr. Mary, but I can't think of anything scarier than being told that I have a malignant brain tumor. So you got that news. You're still here today.
Right.
Fear is at the core of this. Tell us your fear story.
Well, okay, I've got a good one. Yes, it definitely was something that pretty much on the Richter scale of fear, it was probably a 10 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of just went into survivor mode. A lot of other processes were happening. I think, one thing I actually realized that I'd had a wonderful life, and I was grateful for the time that I have had here on this earth. And that was the first sort of reaction. And then the survivor skills kicked in. We all have them, our inner survivor skills. And we use them every day. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to have an extreme condition, but we're all survivors of something,
mm-hmm.
And so we definitely have that place in our being. And so I realized, I had a moment, I just went inside, and I realized that there were no circumstances that could heal me. Not, if all the money in the world or my mother's love or anything other than it was between me and my Creator.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very profound moment. And I realized that I was driving my bus, and I wasn't going to immediately listen to any of the doctors and the expiration dates and that kind of thing. So I just went inward and listened to my intuition. I spoke with all the survivors that I knew and for hints and to try to get some type of common denominator or denominators that survivors have. And
mm-hmm.
I wanted to crack the code and share it with everyone, but I quickly realized that there's no code. Everyone has their own code.
Yeah.
And so by just diving into it, and honestly, that became my world, was just to survive and the best I could on a daily basis. And I did a lot of meditation, a lot of prayer. I called it medipration. And I just it really boosted my spiritual growth. And I think I really began to actually live.
Mm.
And one of my friends, Chris Carr, he's another survivor, and she, one of her quotes is, we're all dying, but how many of us are really living?
Wow.
And so that struck me, and many of her words struck me. And so, I fell down that rabbit hole, the cancer rabbit hole of survival, and,
mm-hmm.
and I saw some amazing, and still am seeing some amazing things that people are capable of. And but I just sort of embraced it after a while. I was freaked out, but I used it as sort of my sage. I refer to the tumor as the pearl,
mm-hmm.
because it was a grain of irritation, and it has turned into this pearl, and sort of has been really, for me, it has been a huge teacher.
Wow. We are running out of time, and I am so disappointed that is happening. But I want to ask you, Dr. Mary, one more question before I hear from everybody about where they can be found. You went down this rabbit hole, you came out. What would you tell somebody today who is facing that kind of incredible fear? Where do they need to start?
Well, it's a very good question. I would say develop a support of people who believe in you, believe in your healing. Stay positive. Don't go on the internet. Don't read about all the things. You are unique. Anything is possible. You use all of your tools and skills that you've developed to manifest and create your vision and healing. And go immediately look for stories of survival. Use mantras of positivity.
Okay, thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Mary. Really quickly, Elizabeth Croydon, where can people find you?
Oh, you can find me at Times Square Thursday through Sunday, selling tickets to Broadway Comedy Club. You can call me on the telephone at 301-655-0997 and buy them. I'll be performing there shortly, and you can follow me on Twitter at @Croydon, Croydon.
And Rachelle?
Rachelle LeBlanc at gmail.com, or you can go to my website, which is my name, RachelleLeBlanc.com.
Okay, and I'm going to post everybody's information on our Facebook page, Inside Out LGBT Radio. See you next week.
Everybody loves the sunshine. Sunshine.